Hey folks, Wish SE. I had a request from a couple of subscribers asking me to talk about the difference between using the slide stop to release the slide and chamber around, or what's called a power stroke coming across the top. I wanted to share with you primarily what works for me and then explain a little bit about why I favor the power stroke versus the slide stop. What is important to realize is that if you shoot different platforms, the slide stop will be in a slightly different place depending on where, how the gun is set up in your hand. So what we have here is we have 5 different auto-loading pistols. We have a Kimber 1911, a Smith & Wesson M&P, a Sig Sauer 226, a Glock 19, and a Browning High Power. What I teach and what I encourage my students to do is obviously learn the platform that you're running consistently. So we're going to look very quickly at each one of these platforms, and you can see from the pictures that we're going to show you here how different they are. So if we look at the Kimber, the slide stop on this is so far forward from me, from my thumb, and again, that's just the way it fits in my hands, that I've got to rotate the gun to get to that slide stop. So if I've shot to slide lock, I've got to rotate the gun up to be able to get to that. However, if I just use the power stroke, I'm that much faster rather than having to rotate the gun. I don't have to change the firing grip of the pistol itself. I'm here, slide is locked back, simply coming across, and then I'm right back on point. Smith & Wesson M&P, same thing, right? So if I'm working this, in this case, the slide stop does is fitting right against where my thumb is. Still, I will use a power stroke probably 99% of the time because it's much more efficient for me. Boom, then across the top. The SIG in particular for me, the slide stop is very close actually to my thumb. That's an easy one to manipulate. But what do? Again, same thing that I would do with any other. I'm simply grabbing across the top, that power stroke, which chambers around, then I'm getting back on point, doing whatever I need to do. Glock 19, same thing. For me, this is just at the very end of my thumb here, so I'm reaching across and I'm grabbing that. So for me, again, if the slide is locked back, speed reload up and in, for me it's much faster. Browning High Power, same thing. So for me, again, the slide stop on this gun happens to fit right where my thumb is. That's just the natural ergonomics of the Browning. However, I'm still doing the exact same thing. Slides locked back to the rear, insert a mag across the top. Here's the other thing that many people don't consider. If you wear gloves, or if you're carrying any type of sidearm like this and you're wearing gloves, you're in a cold environment or whatever, being able to get to that slide stop with a glove on is very, very different than when you're not wearing a glove. So it's super important, to be consistent and practice with what you know. So for me, I favor that power stroke in every type of situation. I'm gonna run the power stroke because it's much more effective for me, and I think it's much more consistent on every single platform. It really doesn't matter what type of semi-auto you're running. You're able to be consistent in chambering around. You're not hunting for the slide stop. So, some people will use their non-dominant hand to release that. Other people have large hands that they're able to get right on that and do it. I'm not saying that you shouldn't learn to do it. What I'm saying is for consistency, the ability to get that going works better. Finally, if your hands are wet, bloody, something like that. The ability sometimes maybe to get to this point, depending on the gun, get to that slide stop and get it engaged, may or may not work. Power stroke works every single time.
One other important consideration is the fact that I am trying to go for economy of motion, basically efficiency in everything I do with a handgun so I can be more consistent and more proficient. So I've just loaded some dummy rounds into the Glock 19. And what I want to show you is the other reason that I favor the power stroke. And that's for the following reason. Type 1 malfunction, right? I get a click instead of a bang. I'm going to tap, I'm going to rack, and I'm going to be back on point. Now, think about this. That action is exactly what I do in a power stroke. Insert a mag into the gun, and I'm simply coming across the top to chamber around. Same thing with a type 2 malfunction, so stovepipe. So I'm going to do the exact same thing, right? Tap, rack, and back on point. Power stroke, once again. Type 3 malfunction, right? I've got some really ugly situation here where I've got to clear out the cartridge that's stuck in brass in the feedway, basically, right? So I've got this type of malfunction. Tap, lock the slide back, work the action, reinsert, power stroke across the top. So in every single one of those malfunctions, I'm using a power stroke. So if I'm using a power stroke in that, why wouldn't I want to be consistent in chambering around the same way?
Well, folks, that's the way it looks. That's a quick overview on why I personally prefer using the power stroke to the slide stop. I think it's more efficient. I think it works in more situations, whether you're wearing gloves, whether your hands are wet, whatever it is. I think it's easier to master. And finally, for me, because it's consistent with other malfunction drills, it's really the same process. So I'm not having to think, well, here I'm using my slide stop, here I'm tap and racking, right? I'm just doing the same thing. Anytime I want to get the gun running, I'm simply inserting a mag, coming across the top with that power stroke to chamber around. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for the subscriber who requested that we talk about this. And finally, and as always, stay safe.